and especially appreciate the words of Madam Ambassador Beda, who gave us a fantastic overview of the business and socioeconomic culture and in Canada. So I think that's very helpful to our attendees this morning. So we're going to be diving into some of the legal aspects of doing business in Canada. And before I do that, I also just want to mention that one of Madam Ambassador's colleagues in the Diplomatic Corps is also with us today, and that is the Ambassador to Canada from Costa Rica, Mr. Ambassador Mauricio Ortiz. Thank you very much and welcome. And so as Madam Ambassador Beda was explaining to us, the context in Canada is I think one could say we are grounded in what's called, of course, the rule of law. And I think that's extremely important as a business context for Canada. Today, I'm going to be focusing on some of the federal laws which govern all of Canada, but in particular, I will be focusing on Ontario laws in the province of Ontario with respect to expanding business to Canada. One thing I do want to point out is that in the 10 provinces of Canada and in the territories as well, we can say that the business laws are actually quite similar. They're separate and distinct for each of the provinces, but in terms of the general principles that we're going to be discussing today, they are, of course, very similar. Myself, I'm a senior lawyer with the law firm of Mills & Mills. I'm also a registered trademark agent in Canada and a licensed trademark attorney in the United States. I am a member of the New York Bar, as well as a member of the Quebec Bar and the Ontario Bar. So we will be discussing some trademark aspects a little bit later in the presentation, and I will be able to assist businesses with their overall brand strategies for North America, not just for Canada. And some of the most famous marks that have registered are the famous I Love New York mark, as well if you are a fan of some early science fiction movies. Actually, the DeLorean marks in Canada, that was the DeLorean car was the famous car in Back to the Future. So this presentation, of course, is not legal advice. We do encourage everyone to seek legal counsel for their particular situation. So something I want to start off in is a quote from Muhammad Ali, a hero. He says, "If my mind can conceive it, my heart can believe it, then I can achieve it." So I think that's extremely important for what you are doing when you're thinking of your expansion plans, your plans of expanding business to Canada or internationally. So today we're going to cover a lot of issues, and I'm going to be talking about permitted Canadian business entities, whether what could be right for you, what is the difference between branch offices or subsidiaries. We'll be talking about the LLCs in Canada, whether they exist, limited liability corporations. Another alternative is a ULC, unlimited liability corporation. We'll be discussing a little bit about asset purchases versus share purchases. We'll be speaking about employment considerations for foreign businesses. As I mentioned, we're going to be talking about some of the IP issues. We're going to talk about some specific labeling requirements for Canada if you have products. And we'll be speaking at the end a little bit about business liability insurance. So let's start off now with the permitted business entities in Canada. So there's three basic types of structures, legal structures that are available for businesses in Canada. The first one is the sole proprietorship. The second one is the partnership. And the third one is the corporation. So now let's look into the sole proprietorship first of all. So the sole proprietorship is informal and quite easily created. It's actually the most common business structure, which is chosen by small businesses in Canada. It might not be the structure that will be set up by many or most of the people on this call. The thing or the issue about the sole proprietorship is that the business and the operator are the same in the eyes of the legal and the tax authorities. So the business's financial details will be listed in a separate section of the CRA, or the Canada Revenue Agency, personal income tax form. Now, the business's money and the responsibilities of the business are also the responsibility of the owner of the business, and vice versa. So it's really all together. And so this type of entity does present some opportunities and possibilities for tax management on the part of the sole proprietorship. And so if the business generates a loss, that loss can be applied to reduce income gained from other sources. And our next speaker is going to be going into the tax issues a little bit more. And finally, the sole proprietor is personally liable for all of the functions and debts of the business. And so, for instance, if a lease is signed, it's a personal responsibility of the owner. So now the next one is the partnership. And it's similar to the sole proprietor, but instead of one proprietor, there are two or more. And so as with the sole proprietorship, there's actually no set legal structure for a partnership. Partnerships can be registered, and most often are registered under the Partnership Act. But instead of a legal structure, there's a type of a contractual arrangement. So normally partners will have a partnership agreement in terms of the percentages, sharing of revenues, expenses, and tasks, the things that each partner is supposed to do, what they bring to the partnership. And so, of course, a partnership can include a joint venture. It can include an entity that has several corporations in a partnership. So when preparing their own individual taxes, the partners will apply the same percentages in the partnership to their income and expenses. So now the next structure is the structure that is going to be most common for people on this call, and that, of course, is the incorporation. And of course, incorporations are more complicated legal structures compared to a sole proprietorship or a partnership. And an incorporation is a process in which a separate legal entity is created, and it's owned by the shareholders. An incorporation creates formal ownership shares, which that produces a taxation and a legal distance between the company and the shareholders. So this has tax advantages for the owners, who are often, usually, paid as employees of the corporation. So now as well, the corporate structure, an incorporation structure, provides some liability protection for the shareholders in terms of the debts, and it also offers some protection for a company's name. So now the company's officers and directors and even shareholders, they may come and go, but the corporation exists until it is wound down, until it is dissolved, or even a court order might declare that it is terminated. So one of the next issues when we're talking about incorporations is whether to have a provincial incorporation or a federal incorporation. Now, many of you on this call are familiar with the structure, for instance, in the United States. In the United States, you don't have a federal incorporation possibility. You have to incorporate state by state. So you choose whichever state you are going to have your head office in. And in Canada, it's similar. You can choose which province you're going to have your head office, and you can incorporate in that province, or you can have a federal incorporation. So with a provincial incorporation, one has to be aware that the costs for incorporation, they vary according to each province. If you have a federal company, then you do have to register in one particular province. If you have a provincial corporation and you want to do business in another province, then you also have to do that extra provincial registration in that other province. So let's say your company is incorporated in Ontario, but you also have a branch office in BC, in British Columbia, then you would do this extra provincial registration. So some of the other requirements for a federal incorporation, there is an annual return that is required. Annual returns are required in some provinces, but not in all the provinces. For instance, in Ontario, an annual return is not required to be filed every year. So having an annual return does mean a little bit more administrative work, but it's really not that much. It's not such a big deal to have to do this annual return. So why would somebody choose a federal corporation as opposed to a provincial corporation? One of the reasons is that sometimes there can be perceived it could be more prestigious to be perceived as having a federal charter, and so the costs are really about the same. A little bit more can be a little bit more expensive in federally if you're registering extra provincially in other provinces, but there is that advantage of the credibility. So we'll move on to another component, is to whether to have a branch office, a subsidiary, or an affiliate. So these are some of the types of considerations that foreign companies can think about. They can think whether they will operate their business as a branch office, a subsidiary, or affiliate. So let's look at each one of these one by one. So first of all, the branch office. What does this mean? So when a branch operation is used, the foreign entity is going to actually be operating in Canada. There's not a new Canadian business that is incorporated. What happens is that you use this extra-provincial registration, and so the company, let's say the company from Ecuador or Peru, will do a registration in Ontario or in Quebec or whichever province it chooses to make its head office. So the one thing to remember is that the corporate name can't be registered if it is the same or similar to one that's already in use in the province that you choose. In addition, in Quebec, because of the charter of the French language, foreign corporations must register a French name. So you can register an English name or even a Spanish name, but you must register a French name. So the other considerations is that there can be annual returns, as we discussed. There can be annual returns to file and costs with that. As well, a Canadian branch of a foreign company that is carrying on business in Canada through a permanent establishment, while it's not a separate corporate entity, it is treated like a Canadian resident corporation and will be subject to tax under Part 1 of the Income Tax Act on the income that is earned in Canada. So now let's go to the next type of possibility for foreign corporations. That's the subsidiary. And so if the Canadian subsidiary corporation is chosen, then this is a separate incorporation. And so we have the costs of incorporating a new Canadian entity. There's the ongoing maintenance expenses. There's the cost of preparing and filing corporate tax returns, the corporate returns, the financial statements, income tax returns in Canada. So for instance, if you're doing a federal corporation, you have to have Canadian directors. So Canadian resident directors. So you have to determine if there are individuals who are resident in Canada who are available to serve as directors due to the Canadian residency requirements for directors federally and in some provinces. Now, as Denise Robertson had mentioned at the beginning of the conference, there's been quite a big change in Ontario, and that is with respect to Bill 213. And this is one of the most fundamental changes for foreign businesses, because Bill 213 is eliminating the requirement for Canadian resident directors. And this law is going to come into effect as of July the 5th. So if you incorporate today, you have to have a Canadian director. If you incorporate from July 5th onwards, then you no longer have, and this is in Ontario, then you no longer have this requirement for a Canadian director. As well, there's certain corporate records which must be maintained in Canada when you have a Canadian corporation. For instance, in Ontario, there's a specific registry in addition to the officers, directors, and shareholders registers. There's a specific registry for listing and detailing the property, meaning the real property, the land that is owned by the corporation. In terms of taxes, I'm going to be letting Sabina speak a little bit more on taxes, but just to know that resident Canadian corporations will pay income tax on their worldwide income. So let's look to the next type of organization that foreign corporations can use to enter into Canada, and that's the affiliate. So an affiliate is similar to a subsidiary, since there is the cost of incorporating a new Canadian entity. We have to consider shareholder agreements, as well as ongoing expenses. So an affiliate and an associate are used oftentimes synonymously, meaning that it's sometimes used, the words are interchangeable. And these words are used to describe a company with a parent company that only owns a minority stake in the ownership of the company. And so a minority stake is 50% or less of a company. So in the business immigration context, Joseph will talk about affiliates through shareholders. Now, an affiliate is used to describe a company with a parent company that possesses the minority stake in the ownership of the affiliate. So in many instances of foreign direct investment, companies create subsidiaries and affiliates rather than, let's say, mergers and acquisitions. And they do that in the host country. Sometimes they do this to prevent a negative stigma associated with foreign ownership, or a negative opinion associated with being owned by, for instance, a controversial parent company. So it's an interesting mechanism that is used, because if a local, let's say a local Canadian company, partners with a company in Ecuador, there will be that that positive perception in Canada that the company that the foreign company takes an ownership position in is not being sold or taken over by a foreign entity. It's just has an investment, which is perceived as a good thing. So now, parent companies, and Sabina will discuss this a little bit more, but parent companies are required to combine their financial statements of subsidiaries with their financial statements. So there are consolidated tax returns. And something also that's important to remember is that the new Canadian company that's created has a distinct legal entity, a distinct legal personality from the foreign company, let's say the company in Ecuador or in Peru. And so this separates the liabilities, which can be extremely important. Some other considerations about affiliates. Using an affiliate is a good way to enter into a new market. Becoming affiliated with a company, a local company that's experienced in a particular market, the Canadian market, or in Ontario or in Quebec, is actually a quick way to gain access to that market. And so going the affiliate route or the affiliate way can help bypass the learning curve and many substantial expenditures, costs that come when you are breaking into a new market. And so it's it's often said that two are better than one, and so that is where entering into an affiliate relationship can be extremely advantageous for a foreign company. Another consideration is that the brands of the let's say the parent company and the subsidiary or affiliate are separate. So there's if there is a separation with respect to the trademarks. So the affiliate opportunity, it's an investment opportunity for companies. A company can be appealing for another one to take an ownership stake in because it's an attractive investment. And so the potential returns for a parent company can be attractive by investing in an affiliated company. And those returns can be higher than other types of investments that a company, a foreign company, can allocate their capital to. Another advantage of entering into the affiliate relationship is the synergies that can be created, and also controlling, for instance, the supply chain. If a foreign company, a company from Peru or Ecuador needs a certain material in order to make its product, and that material is in Canada, well, having this investment in a Canadian company can help it to control the supply chain. There also, finally, there is the opportunity to save on taxes with using the affiliate structure, and that's something that Sabina will explain a little bit more. So something about what we call LLCs, or limited liability corporations. It's a non-existent structure in Canada. So why would I even talk about the LLCs if it's not existent in Canada? Well, that's because they're a very popular form of corporation in the United States. And so many companies that have experience with the United States believe that it also exists in Canada. Unfortunately, it is not available. You can register an LLC in Canada as an extra-provincial LLP. So it's the same as we were discussing previously. If you have an LLC, then you can do an extra-provincial registration of that LLC. And so the LLC can operate in Canada, but you just can't create an LLC in Canada. So we have some other things in Canada. There's the limited liability partnership, which is only available to professionals, and for instance, in Ontario, only lawyers. And only lawyers who are qualified in Ontario. So if you are a foreign lawyer, you can't form an LLP. You must become qualified in Ontario in order to form this kind of corporation. So another kind of corporation that's available in Canada and not in Ontario is called a ULC, and that's an unlimited liability corporation. So a ULC is a form of corporation that's created by statute or by law, and it's only available in Alberta, British Columbia, or Nova Scotia. And so a ULC qualifies as what's called a disregarded entity or a flow-through entity under the US regulations. And so it does, if you have a US organization affiliated with yourself, it permits the pass-through of US federal tax treatment of a proprietorship or partnership. So as the name implies, the ULC status requires that the shareholders are liable for all the debts and liabilities of the corporation. So a ULC is a taxable Canadian corporation for the purposes of the Income Tax Act. So those are some of the considerations for legal entities. Now we're going to shift gears a little bit. And so I wanted to just bring up another quote from Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And he says, Faith is taking the first step, even when you don't see the whole staircase. And that's exactly what you are doing when you're coming here to this conference. You're taking the first step in terms of thinking about expanding your business to Canada. So let's talk a little bit about asset purchases versus share purchases. And this is something that if you are going to invest in a corporation, you might invest and take a minority stake, as we discussed, and do that by a share purchase. Or you can set up a new corporation and do something like an asset purchase. So let's talk first of all about the share purchase. So share purchase means you're taking over a company, or you can also take over part of the ownership shares of the company. So when you're doing when you're investing in a new company, you are investing in a separate legal entity. So the target company is what we call the company that's going to be bought, is a separate legal entity. And when you purchase the shares, you're purchasing all the assets, all the liabilities, and all the obligations, and maybe any historic problems with that particular company, but also historic benefits. One of the benefits of a share purchase is that you maintain continuity of contracts with employees, with suppliers, and with customers. We will be talking a little bit later about the employment relationships. And so from the context of the share purchase possibility, if you are purchasing shares, then you take on all the obligations of the employees. And so there can be more liability, more responsibilities in terms of if you dismiss employees later on, what you might owe them. So for a seller of the shares, and that is typically the Canadian company, the Canadian shareholders, they are taxed on the proceeds of the disposal of their shares. So now let's go into the asset purchase. So when you're doing an asset purchase, you're purchasing a specific business activity, and the buyer can do what's called cherry picking. So it's like you're picking the best fruit from that tree. You can pick the assets that you want, or you can identify what liabilities you decide that you want to take on. So there are a lot of formalities. There are some formalities when you're transferring the assets, and so those have to be respected. And that's obviously why you will want to hire legal counsel in Canada in order to make sure that when you purchase those assets, that those assets are transferred to you. If it's land, buildings, that they are transferred properly and registered in the land registry. And as well, if you're purchasing assets, you'll want to make sure that there's searches that are done to make sure that there's no registrations against the asset for debts and liens against those assets. So for to say what is the optimal structure for a particular taxpayer, it really depends on all of the relevant circumstances, whether you're going to purchase assets or shares. And as Sabina Mexis will be speaking next, one of the favorite things that she likes to say in terms of what structure you should take for your tax purposes, she'll say it depends, and it really does depend on your particular requirements, but also on the requirements of the seller. So for instance, from a tax point of view, a seller usually prefers to sell the shares of the company, of the target company. On a share sale, the seller realizes a capital gain or a capital loss. And so the primary benefit associated with a share sale is that only 50% of the capital gain is included in the seller's income. The other 50% is not subject to tax. Now, an asset sale is usually less favorable to a seller because all or some of the proceeds might be fully included in their income. So there's going to be some negotiation between the parties and with the assistance of the lawyers and the accountants also, in terms of whether to proceed with an asset purchase or a share purchase. So let's really switch gears now and discuss about employment considerations for foreign businesses. And so the question that you have to ask is, what does a non-Canadian company planning to hire in Ontario need to know? So of course we are speaking about Ontario, but I will say that the laws across the provinces, as I mentioned before, are quite similar. So the first thing is the Ontario Human Rights Code. And there are human rights codes in each of the provinces and also federal human rights code. So a non-Canadian business which plans to hire employees in Ontario should be aware of our particular workplace laws, as well as some of the more important aspects of our common law system. Foreign businesses are sometimes surprised by how different our laws and rules can be when it comes to the employment relationship. Any business looking to employ people in Ontario should first get advice from qualified counsel so that they fully understand the system of laws governing the employment relationship. So the Human Rights Code. Ontario employers are governed by the Ontario Human Rights Code. And this code provides that every person has the right to be free from discrimination and harassment in their employment on the basis of their race, ancestry, place of origin, color, ethnic origin, citizenship, sex, sexual orientation, age, even their record of offenses, so their criminal record, their marital status, their family status, or even a handicap. So you can see that there's quite a lot of considerations in the Human Rights Code. And very importantly for employers is the word accommodation. Accommodation is so important. Employers have the ultimate responsibility for maintaining and creating an inclusive work environment that is free from discrimination and harassment, and where everyone's human rights are respected. So organizations and institutions operating in Ontario, and I would say in Canada, have a legal duty to take steps to prevent and respond to situations that involve competing rights. All right, so another important act is the Employment Standards Act. So the Employment Standards Act in Ontario provides for certain minimum terms and conditions of employment for most employees in Ontario. This does not apply to employees that are living in Ontario but might be governed by federal legislation. There is specific federal legislation for those employees, but they'll be similar. So the Act sets out the minimum standard regarding wages, hours of work, overtime, vacations, public holidays, leaves of absences, including pregnancy and parental leaves, as well as termination of employment and rights to be reinstated in a job, in a position, if one is fired. So in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, the Ontario government made certain regulations that changed some of the Employment Standards Act rules during the COVID-19 period. And so these temporary rules actually continue to be in effect until July 3, and they may be extended. So non-unionized employees whose employer has temporarily reduced or eliminated their hours of work for reasons related to the COVID-19 pandemic are deemed to be on a job-protected infectious disease emergency leave. And a non-unionized employee is not considered to be laid off if their employer temporarily reduces or eliminates their hours of work or wages for COVID-19 reasons. So as well, a non-unionized employee is not considered to be constructively dismissed under the Employment Standards Act if their employer temporarily reduces or eliminates their hours of work or wages for reasons related to the COVID-19 pandemic. So we use this word constructive dismissal. That is a specific term that if you're an employee and your boss or the company changes, let's say, your hours or your duties, what you're supposed to do, or even your place of work, you can say, I have been fired, and it's called a constructive dismissal. And so then there's going to be consequences as a result of that. And so this law that was, this regulation that was brought into place by the Ontario government changes that just for the period of the pandemic. So something important to note is that that corporations should note is that employees who believe that their employer is not complying with the Ontario employment standards can file a claim or a complaint with the Ministry of Labour in Ontario. So next, we're going to speak a little bit about the common law and wrongful dismissal. So in Canada, there is no concept of employment at will. This is a concept, employment at will is a concept that might be familiar to corporations that do business in the United States, because that's a very common, in certain states, employment at will is the type of rule that exists. But in Canada, under our common law, which is judge-made law, employment can be terminated at any time without just cause, but only on the provision of reasonable prior notice of termination or payments instead of notice. So there are two ways that you can satisfy these provisions. If you decide that an employee is not working out for you, and it could be because of their issues relating to them, or it could be because of issues relating to your company, you have a choice. You could say, well, we're going to provide you with a certain notice period. Let's say it might be 6 weeks, 2 months. You have to consult, for instance, with your human resources department. Best to consult with an employment lawyer, someone specialized in employment law, to figure out what's the right notice period. And so you can give that person a lump sum payment, or you can let them work during the notice period, and that is allowable. So that notice period, you've told them, let's say on the 1st of July, that as of the 30th of August, they will no longer be working at the company. So they work at the company, they're paid, but they know that they will be leaving, and so they're free to look for work. They're released from their obligation of loyalty in that respect. They can look for work. So it's not unusual in the courts in Canada for judges to routinely award a notice period in the range of 1 month's notice for every year of employment, and sometimes possibly more. But this is not a hard and fast rule. It does depend on a variety of factors. Age is one of the factors. The seniority is another factors. So we're not going to get into that right now, but it's important to realize that each job can have sometimes different notice provisions according to the common law. So we'll briefly touch on the Employment Insurance Act. This is a federal act, so it applies in all the provinces and territories in Canada. It is designed to provide income protection for employees who are unemployed for a variety of reasons. And so the statute provides for benefits in addition to termination of employment. It could be for periods of illness or pregnancy or leave of absence. And both the employer and the employee contribute premiums, money, to the insurance scheme, the plan. And so it is a combined contribution, one on the part of the employer and another on the part of the employee, which contributes, it's like insurance premiums. So next, we have what's called the Occupational Health and Safety Act. Sometimes when we talk about this as a short form, we say OSHA, the Occupational Health and Safety Act. So our provincial act requires that places of employment establish a health and safety committee in most workplaces to prevent workplace accidents or injuries. And a violation of this act can be prosecuted as a provincial offense. So it's a type of criminal offense if you violate this law. And so individuals and corporations can be subject to fines if they are found guilty, and individuals also can face the additional risk of incarceration in jail. So it's a very important act to be aware of. In addition, we have another workplace safety act. It's called the Workplace Safety and Insurance Act, and it's formally known as workers' compensation. This creates a system of compensation for workplace accidents or injuries that occur while workers are in the course of their employment. So employer contributions are the exclusive source of funding for the WSIB, so the Workplace Safety and Insurance Board scheme. So next, we have the Pay Equity Act. So this is an act that's in Ontario. They do have similar acts in many or most other provinces. So very important to keep in mind, it's a legislation, a law that is aimed to take a look at systemic gender discrimination in compensation for work that's performed by employees in what are called female job classes. So the pay equity model is based on the concept that employees should be paid equally for work which is of equal value to the employer, not just for work that is substantially similar. So every private employer with 10 or more employees must establish and maintain compensation practices that provide for pay equity in their own establishments. So this is something that's quite critical for companies that are coming and doing business in Canada. The final act or law that I want to highlight is the Ontario Labor Relations Act, and this is for unionized workers. And so this law talks about who can belong to a union, how can a union obtain rights, and that the employer has a duty to bargain in good faith. And so there's the right, to strike, I think what's important for employers or for companies that are thinking about, let's say, acquiring a business that has already a union in place is that there are successor rights. So these are cases where a unionized employer transfers a unionized business or undertaking to another business. And so if you are a foreign company taking over a local Canadian company that has a union, well, you take over the union, even if you're, let's say, just purchasing the assets, you can be required to take on unionized employees. So that's something that's quite important to consider. So in terms of the Labor Relations Act, I think the final thing is we've discussed that there is this duty to bargain in good faith. Okay, so now let's go on to an area that I particularly enjoy, which is trademark, patent, and copyright protection. In my view, the IP of a company is one of the business's most valuable assets. The IP of a company is intangible. It's of course something that you can't see, but it can be more important sometimes than the equipment. So let's talk about trademarks first. So what's a trademark? A trademark is a sign or a combination of signs that are used on a product or even for services that distinguishes one set of goods or services from those of another. So an ordinary trademark includes words, designs, and even tastes, textures, colors, sounds, and things like that. So you can register, words as a trademark if you meet all the legal requirements. There's also certification marks, and so this relates to that goods or services meet a defined standard. One example that we give often is the Woolmark design, which is owned by Woolmark Americas Limited, and it's used on clothing and other goods to show that these goods are made of wool. So trademark registration in Canada can be canceled if someone else in Canada has made use of a similar trade name or trademark in the past before you obtained your registration. So it's very important to understand that just because you get a trademark registration does not mean that you have, let's say, higher or superior rights to a previous user who didn't bother to get a trademark registration. We do have those common law rights in Canada. So now in Canada, a trademark registration is good for 10 years. It used to be good for 15 years. So maybe there are some people on the call who had trademark registrations previously, and your old trademark certificate was for 15 years. When it comes time to renew that registration, the renewal will be for 10 years. So Some of the benefits of trademark registration in Canada is you get 10-year protection, you get priority in respect of applications, trademark applications in other jurisdictions. So let's say in the United States, and you have what's called an assumed right to exclusive use of the trademark across Canada, from Nova Scotia to British Columbia, across the entire country of Canada, because it's a federal law, it's federal registration. You can also, when you have a trademark registration, it enhances your ability to enforce your trademark rights in Canada, and also it enhances your ability to monitor counterfeit products at the Canadian border. So that's, let's say, yeah, that's extremely important. So the other benefits of trademark registration is, public notice, and it facilitates licensing. So this is something that's very important. If you wish to enter into licensing agreements in Canada, then it's much easier for you to enter into that licensing agreement, and the party that you're contracting with will have that security. They will feel more secure because they see that it's a registered trademark. The registered trademark becomes a corporate asset. So it creates an actual corporate asset which goes on your company's balance sheet. And then having a registered mark in Canada in particular helps you to initiate domain name proceedings. There's the .ca domain name. And so if you have a registered trademark in Canada and somebody has registered a domain name, a .ca with your trademark, there is a procedure that you can take to have that domain name transferred over to you. So now we say here there's an exemption with a federal registered trademark. If you have a trademark in English, then you are entitled to use that English trademark in Quebec. So that's something that's very important. Now, the charter of the French language in Quebec can be from a labeling and naming perspective can be quite tricky. So that's something, if you're going to do business in Quebec, it is important to seek legal counsel with respect to the Quebec rules. Okay, so let's now talk about patents. So in Canada, we have the first to file rule. So the first applicant to file a patent application for an invention is entitled to obtain the patent. And so you should file as soon as possible after you complete your invention, in case someone else is working on a similar type of invention. And we see throughout history that this happens all the time, that people think of similar ideas and 2 or 3 people are working on the same invention at the same time. So first to file. Also, only in Canada, the rights that you have under a Canadian patent extend throughout Canada, but not to other countries. And so it is important to decide, if you're doing business, for instance, in the United States or in other countries, to seek protection in those countries as well. So in addition, for instance, foreign patents, if you have a patent in Ecuador or in Peru, it does not protect your invention in Canada. So you should seek Canadian patent protection for those inventions. So patents apply to inventions, and an invention is eligible if it is new. So that means it's the first in the world. You're the first in the world with this invention. It's useful. It has to be useful. It has to be functional, operative. It has to work. And it has to be inventive. It has to show some ingenuity, meaning it's not obvious to someone with average skill who works in that area. So someone with average skill couldn't have just thought of this on their own. So an invention can be a product, for example, a new type of door lock. It can be a composition. So for instance, a chemical composition used for lubricants in a door lock. It can be a machine. So for instance, a machine for making door locks. It can be a process. You can have a patent on a process. Again, a method for making door locks. Or you can also have a patent on an improvement of any of these. So there are some things that can't be patented, just concepts, ideas, just general, ideas, scientific principles, abstract theories, even higher life forms can't be patented. So those are some things that are important to remember. When you get a patent, sorry, I skipped. When you get a patent, you have 20-year protection. So let's go on now to the copyrights. And a copyright is for a work, a creation, an original work of art or of music or something that's written. So when you make a work, it's automatically protected by copyright when you create it. However, you can register your copyright, and when you do that, you get a certificate of registration that you can use in court as evidence that you own the protected work. So we talk about a work being a creation. So it could be a poem, a painting, a musical score, a computer program, which could be more important for some of the people on the call. So copyright provides protection for literary, artistic works. So literary works also can be important for people on the call. The type of literary, something that you've written for your own, let's say, company manuals, that sort of thing. So the Copyright Act, gives you, you'll get a certificate of registration, which is, evidence that the copyright exists and that the person that's registered is the owner of the copyright. But the Copyright Office is not responsible for policing or checking registered works and how people use them. So the Copyright Office also does not guarantee the legitimacy of the ownership or the originality of the work that is registered. There can be court challenges about those things, certainly. So generally, copyright lasts for the life of the author plus 50 years. That's sort of the general rule. There's there's quite a lot more issues that can be discussed, but let's quickly go on to industrial design. That talks about how a product looks, and there is a 15-year registration. You do have to make public disclosure. I'm going to go very quickly now on some of these other things because I don't want to eat into my colleagues' time. There is labeling requirements in Canada. There is the Consumer Packaging and Labeling Act that you should be aware of. And typically it's for prepackaged consumer products. And one of the big issues that should be highlighted in Canada is that it's bilingual labeling is required. So that's French English labeling is required. And now we'll also briefly touch on business liability insurance. In certain jurisdictions, insurance is a must. It's just a common business practice. In other foreign jurisdictions that we deal with, business insurance may not be so common, or they may not have all of the protection that is available in Canada. And so, having business insurance can provide you financial protection against lawsuits, against unforeseen events. There's different types of coverage for business owners. And so you should be thinking about the type of coverage that you need. So some of the common types of business insurance, let's say there are general liability insurance, errors and omission insurance, and commercial property insurance. And so these are even more new types of insurance. Cyber liability insurance, directors and officers insurance, of course, is very important. And if you're in the federal jurisdiction and you have a Canadian resident director, then certainly you're going to probably have that as a requirement by that Canadian resident director wanting directors and officers liability insurance. So it can be relatively low cost in Canada. For a medium-sized business, you could anticipate, spending $650 a year on a $2 million general liability policy. Again, I'm not an insurance agent, and so you will have to consult with your insurance agent, and costs can be obviously quite different for your company, depending on your business size, the location, your years of experience, number of employees, and these kinds of things. So that wraps up my presentation, and I just want to leave you with one quote from Nelson Mandela, and he says, "Vision without action is just a dream. Action without vision just passes the time, and vision with action, which is what we hope you will be doing, can change the world." And so this is your team at Mills & Mills. We have quite a good, robust team of lawyers here, and we'll be happy to help you, to assist you in any way. And I'm certainly happy at this point in time to answer any questions that you may have. So thank you so much.
Muchas gracias, Taras, por tu intervención y por toda la información valiosa que nos has dado. Ahora te voy a hacer una pregunta que nos llegó. Dice, buenas tardes a todos. Mi pregunta es si una marca registrada en Venezuela se puede comercializar en Canadá. Muchas gracias.
Okay, I'm sorry. If you wouldn't mind, Natalie, repeating that question so I can hear that again from the interpreter. I apologize. I was on the wrong channel.
Of course. Buenas tardes a todos. Mi pregunta es si una marca registrada en Venezuela se puede comercializar en Canadá.
Okay. Yes, thank you for the question. So yes, absolutely. You have a registered trademark in Venezuela, and so to obtain proper protection in Canada, you'll want to register it in Canada, and then you can commercialize it. As I said, we do have what are called common law rights, which are based on use, and so you can use your brand without actually getting a trademark registration in Canada, but we do advise that you get the registration, because then it prevents things like what we call pirates or squatters from coming and interfering with your mark. You have a registration in Venezuela, you want to control that mark in Canada, and also in the United States. These are very important things.
Perfecto, Taras, muchísimas gracias. Veo que el embajador tiene levantada su mano. Si puede desbloquear su micrófono, puede hacer su pregunta. Muchas gracias.
Buenos días, ¿me escuchan?
Sí.
¿En español?
Sí.
Ok.
Sí.
Bueno, good morning, bonjour, buenos días. First of all, I want to congratulate my colleague, la embajadora Sylvie Bedard por la exposición que hizo tan clara. Y yo le agregaría a lo que ella expuso, que con Canadá tiene una gran ventaja, que la realidad se encuentra con las expectativas. Eso es muy importante, embajadora. Y es cierto, le agradezco y la felicito por su español tan fluido. La palabra multiculturalismo es difícil de pronunciar para todos, inclusive para los de habla hispana. Gracias por supuesto, a la oficina del bufete de abogados Mills y InterJurisconsult por la organización, a Natalie Moya por la coordinación, a Carla Malvestiti que me invitó y por supuesto felicitar a la presentación del abogado Taras Kulish. Mucha claridad en todo y es importante esa información que se pueda replicar en una segunda actividad con Costa Rica. Desde ahora les hago la propuesta para poder hacer esta misma actividad necesaria con el sector privado costarricense y, por qué no, el centroamericano. Muy breve, imaginémonos por un momento en que todos nuestros países estamos sentados en una larga mesa donde Canadá está al norte, Estados Unidos, México, Centroamérica, el Caribe y el sur, allá al final de la mesa. Yo creo que es un momento importante para los que estamos en el centro y los extremos de la mesa, que nos pongamos de pie y nos veamos un poco más y nos acerquemos. Me refiero a Canadá, a la región centroamericana y a la región suramericana. Si bien es cierto, Estados Unidos es un actor muy importante para Canadá en materia comercial, para el centro, el Caribe y Suramérica, pero yo creo que Canadá, sugerencia respetuosa, viene trabajando muy fuerte para diversificar su portafolio de inversión y de servicios, más allá de tener una relación con su país vecino y una dependencia de un 76% de su comercio. Yo creo que es un buen momento para que desde Canadá, como dije, levante esa silla y mire más hacia el centro, el Caribe y al sur, pero también, como ustedes le están haciendo muy acertadamente, Centroamérica, el Caribe y Suramérica, vuelva la mirada más allá del comercio con los Estados Unidos y ponga su mirada también en Canadá. Entonces, yo quería felicitarlos por la actividad, que es muy, muy importante, de nuevo, replicarla. Y la pregunta, disculpe que me extendiera, pues, porque es que quería aprovechar, ya que dentro de unos minutos tengo una reunión con la señora vicepresidenta de la República. Yo quería, cuando termine, volver a conectarme, por eso me extendí. Pero la pregunta para Taras era, dentro de esa exposición que él hizo, ¿verdad? De inversión, de registro de empresas, de procedimientos y más, ¿es de obligatoriedad el cumplimiento en materia de responsabilidad social empresarial de las empresas? ¿Y qué tanto el componente medioambiental juega un papel, digamos, vinculante y de obligatoriedad para las empresas que desean registrarse e invertir en Canadá? Muchísimas gracias de nuevo y discúlpenme que me extendí un poquito más del tiempo. Gracias.
Muchísimas gracias.
Thank you very much.
Ahora sigue, por favor.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador, for your words, for your very kind words about what we're doing here, and as well about the environment, the business environment, and the social environment in Canada, and so certainly we will be accepting your invitation, and we'll certainly be looking to discuss with you how we can bring this sort of forum to Costa Rica and Central America. Thank you so much. So to answer the question that you asked, I think this is of course, I went a little bit over in my presentation, and it's impossible to speak about all of the aspects, the different laws. You've raised a very important issue about environmental laws, and I think certainly that will be something that I will add to my next presentation. Thank you so much. So really, yes, we have some significant and robust environmental protection laws in Canada, and certainly any business which is coming to do business in Canada must consider these rules and regulations, and so that's certainly important. You talked as well about corporate social responsibility, and I did mention the human rights laws which are in place, and that's part of corporate social responsibility. There's no such, for instance, obligation on companies to, let's say, to do good or to invest back into, let's say, charities or something like that at this point in time in Canada. But I think the general context in Canada is favorable to social responsibility, corporate responsibility in Canada. It is viewed positively by the people of Canada, and so it seems to me that that companies certainly take their social and corporate responsibilities seriously in Canada, and as well the Canadian government has a very favorable charitable regime in place. And so companies can set up charitable foundations, for instance, to do good work, to do and carry out their corporate social responsibility. So that's certainly something that's very important. When you come to a new place, you want to learn the language, you want to learn the culture and the customs, and I do believe that corporate responsibility is an important part of the fabric of Canada. Thank you for the question. I don't know if Madam Ambassador Bédard, if you wish to comment on that question or that issue of the corporate responsibility in Canada.
Yo voy a responder en español. Solo tú agradecer al embajador de Costa Rica por este punto. También lo voy a añadir a mi lista de razones por la cual hacer negocios en Canadá es una buena idea. Es otro atractivo, es valorización y posición de liderazgo que tiene Canadá en tomar en cuenta los más altos estándares de responsabilidad social corporativa. Y si uno piensa en posicionarse para el mediano largo plazo, son consideraciones importantes en una decisión de negocio y de inversión. Así que muchas gracias, embajador.
Perfecto, muchísimas gracias por todas sus intervenciones. Taras, te voy a hacer una última pregunta. Dice, una marca está registrada y reconocida en los países de la CAN, pero al iniciar el proceso en Canadá, en la búsqueda fonética existe una marca parecida. ¿Cómo se pudiera dirimir esta eventualidad? ¿Existen algunas opciones para subsanarlo? Muchas gracias.
Well, thank you very much for that particular question, and it's of course impossible for me to address this particular issue in this kind of a context. But I will say that the issue is there a confusing mark? So when you're looking at the distinction between two marks, if they sound alike, they don't have to be spelled the same way. There can be an issue, and this particular situation, is quite tricky, especially because you're coming into a new country, and so you may have used your brand, your trademark, for a long period of time in your home country. but it's when was the first time it was used in Canada? And so that is something that would have to be looked at. I'd be happy if the individual who asked that question, they can certainly contact me, and I'd be happy to spend a little bit of time going over those particular fact situation there. It seems like a very interesting situation, not necessarily a good situation, but there could be a solution that we can think about.
Perfecto, Taras. Muchísimas gracias por tu respuesta. Bueno, ahora vamos a continuar y